All right, guys, we're into May, and a lot of people worry about, well, summer markets are coming and it's slow. I think these will be busier summer months than in years past. I think there's some things that could keep us moving, especially if we could get hit again like we did a few weeks ago and creep in some volatility. They just kind of gain back on it. Tomorrow, for those that are live, those listening on recording in the future, this isn't as relevant, but tomorrow the FOMC meeting is upcoming, so just pay attention to short previews of it. They're not supposed to really do anything but make it clear that they're going to hike rates in their next meeting in 6 weeks at their June meeting, which means if they don't, that could be bullish, but don't get too deep into the details. You know what the expectation is, and then move on from there. That's for tomorrow's FOMC statement. It's a 2-day meeting today and tomorrow, 1 o'clock Central. You guys should know that they released their statement. Then later this week, the big unemployment report comes out reflecting how jobs were in the month of April. I'm not going to preview that now. We're too many days away. But ADP, which is often a precursor sometimes to the non-farm payroll component, comes out 7:15 Central tomorrow morning. It's important if that number misses, and it's not important if it doesn't. ADP tomorrow. Now, the topic of this meeting is missing trades. I don't have to ask how many people in here miss trades because I should get yeses from everyone. How many people have a chronic problem missing trades is who I want to speak to. And sometimes you might not have a chronic problem missing trades and then you go in just missing trades. You're not taking them. And let me be clear about the definition of missing trades. Not necessarily not getting filled, or you're just a little late when you're trying to play a breakout, or you tried and you just missed it. Yeah, that's missing a trade, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about not ever putting in an order, not even trying to buy it at the market or rest a bit to get long or whatever. Your setup sets up and you do not trade it, okay? Your setup sets up and you do not trade it. Now, if you noticed, there is no scientific specific setup that this edge teaches you for a reason. It won't work if I made my setup your setup. All the components to create a setup that's mechanical are there, but you got to put it together. Not one guy in our prop firm traded exactly like another guy. Even the guys that were teaching the new classes that came in, they didn't say, okay, I want you guys, when you see this happen, to buy it there and risk 3 ticks to make 5. And that's called the ABC trade. Didn't happen. You have to pull in all the important criteria of what makes a setup a good setup or a higher probability setup, and then be consistent in the way you're going to trade it. You want some discretion, but not too much. Some people can get away with being more discretionary when it comes time to swing the bat or put the trade on. Some guys, if they have too much discretion, they talk themselves out of trades, hence they miss a lot. They never pull the trigger. I know what this is to the extreme. When I traded, it'd be easier if I was actually in a room and you guys were looking at me to listen, but do your best to listen to me. When I was in the pit, launching my trading career, not making any money, struggling, I wasn't losing money because I wasn't trading. It wasn't I was missing setups, though. I was just afraid because I didn't know where the hell the market was going. And that's not as bad than having an idea where the market's going and not pulling the trigger. But I know what it feels to let fear kind of paralyze you. It was awful. I was in my mid-20s thinking I was on my way to making $1 million a year, standing in the pit, and I can't raise my arm. For those that don't know, you got to raise your hand when you're bidding or offering to trade when everything was in an open outcry trading pit. And it wasn't necessarily because I was underfunded. I had enough money in my account. I had saved my whole life for it. So I wasn't underfunded. I didn't think of the money. I thought of, why am I buying it here? Why am I selling it here? And instead of trying to bid with the bidders and offer with the offers, I couldn't even do that. So when I practiced trading in a pit, that was the classes I took, They didn't teach ABC setups. They taught how to scratch, trade, scratch. But I was the most aggressive student in that class, in all three phases of that class. By far the most aggressive person. So I took my personality being aggressive and put it into an environment where I couldn't even raise my hand. It was pretty tough, right? A lot of fear. And I doubt I was ever going to be able to trade unless I found an edge or stripped out randomness. That was my early problems. And the pit was to blame. It wasn't liquid. And I don't want to get into why that's an advantage for pit traders, because pit trading isn't around anymore. You guys know the rest of the story, and then getting hired at a prop firm, and I was off to the races because now I felt like I had direction. I tied in ancillary markets. I found breakouts and was taking them, and I didn't feel like I was worried about being wrong. Again, less randomness. However, you're always going to roll back into, man, I'm just not catching it because I'm hesitating, and look how well it would have worked. And then you don't have good review functionality. So what you end up doing is you can't qualify and quantify how much being afraid is costing you, not just in hard capital, but emotional capital, which is oftentimes worse. Now, I've got something that a friend of mine developed, and I've been telling you guys this all year. When I tell you it's close, it's close. That's going to help a lot of people as it gets rolled out to different platforms. Don't ask me which platform's first or second or third, but it's something that's going to be helpful in attacking this and qualifying this. But that's not what this meeting is about. It just maybe randomly happened, talked to a couple guys over the last few weeks, longer time edge guys that really are seeing it. They got great levels. They're doing their homework to come up with their levels. They pretty much have a setup and a mechanical way to get in and get out, but they're missing it. They're not putting in an order and not getting filled. They're not putting in orders. They're missing too many great setups that they've identified beforehand, and now they're happening for them. So because of that, more than coincidence that these two guys were having trouble with that, and I certainly wouldn't mention them. This is really neither here nor there because there's many people having this problem, I would imagine. But I reach out to Brad. And Brad, there's two Brads I did an interview with. The other Brad, one Brad was an Edge member, but Brad Jelnick, is from the same prop firm. He came in after me. One of the bigger traders at that prop firm for many years. Great trader and also a great explainer. He really is. Now, he did an event, one of these Tuesday meetings about, I don't know, almost a year ago. And he would have done today, but he's moving. So he's going to get back to me after he settles in and then come back to contributing. But he says something to me over the phone. I says, hey, Brad, you got to write that, email or Skype that to me because, and he says, yeah, he says, I could write it just like I said it. He said, because I've said it thousands of times to myself and others. So let's go to the next slide and read it. Again, the question I posed to him, because I'm helping other guys, my loyalties are to everyone that not only invests in this Edge course, but that actually comes every day to the room, to these meetings. My loyalties aren't to people who invest in this and don't even watch the materials and then leave. That's their fault. That's their issue. They want to be physically fit, but they're not going to go to the gym. So is it my fault that they got a membership? Of course not. But to the people who come to the gym every day, I like seeing results. It's important to me. So I specifically reached out for this question. What would you say to guys that are and girls that are missing a lot of trades? Right? What would you say to guys that are missing a lot of trades? And he says, I'm going to break it down in a few lines each, so we're not reading the whole thing. He goes to that, and I made him, I'm not paraphrasing here, I made him email me this. To that, I'd say, do your homework and then trust your risk management plan to protect you versus being wrong. Now, there's more. I want to take this couple lines by a couple lines. To that, I'd say, do your homework and then trust your risk management plan to protect you versus being wrong. Now, I know I make fun of homework, but that doesn't mean you're not supposed to prepare. I make fun of homework where people are spending too many hours creating a bias. You have to do your certain amount of preparation. And you guys do. I think a lot of guys do, especially in the edge team room, right? You guys are comparing some levels and coming up and quantifying. And then trust your risk management plan to protect you versus being wrong. It goes to what I've always said. Know where you're getting out before you get in, especially for your loser. My 12-year-old son can get out winning trades. But he's going to cry to mommy when it comes to getting out of losing trades. So know where you're going to get out before you get in, especially for losers. So that has to be a big part of your trade. All right, let me go on. Now, follow my cursor. The only thing left to do is to put on the trade because the pain of not acting on your homework is greater than the loss potential, assuming you have your risk plan intact. So what he's saying is there's more pain in not acting than taking a damn loss, as long as your risk plan is intact and you're following it. Trust your risk management plan to your setup. The only thing left to do is to put the damn thing on because the pain of not acting is going to be greater than the loss potential. It reminds me when we played cards one night, a bunch of traders, and in the beginning, people are kind of betting light, and finally said someone yelled, "Are we here to F and gamble, or are we here to F and gamble?" And everybody started betting more. And I'm not saying that trading is gambling, but are you here to trade or are you here to trade? Are you here to take risks, or not? As long as there's a risk management plan, it's not fun to lose money, but it ain't fun to keep missing. All right, so let's move on. What does he say? If you keep losing, then you'll need to take a look at what you're doing, but at least you're pulling the trigger. A risk plan is your best friend if you're scared to trade. To me, this is the best line of the whole response. A risk plan is your best friend if you're scared to trade. And you know, when I say don't put stops in, I say that not in a literal sense, like we should never put stops in, but just don't get into where if it worries you, you could use a mental stop, but you got to be disciplined. And if you're not, then you put your stop in, and don't get scared when you see that stop there, blaring headlights at you. And when you use a stop, if it's only 2 ticks away, sometimes that's too close. But remember, this is all about getting people who are missing too many trades over the hump. And if it takes more mechanics, then it takes more mechanics. But a risk plan is your best friend if you're scared to trade. Obviously, if you go back to this top line, if you keep losing, then you'll need to take a look at what you're doing, but at least you're pulling the trigger. At least you're going and dressing up and playing the game. You're showing up to the ballpark. You're going to have to maybe change your stance a little bit. You can't hit the curveball. This is what I think what someone else developed, and it wasn't him, that I've been telling you about will help this process. He goes on to say, put those stops in and just let it go. Use an OCO, which is order cancels order. If your losers get triggered, your potential targets get pulled. That's what an OCO is. If your targets get filled, your stops get pulled. Put in those OCOs and assess everything at the end of each week before making changes. That's what I would say to that. So he tells me this on the phone, and I said, you got to email me this. Could you kind of remember it? He says, yeah, I could remember it. I've been saying it for over 10 years. But you get the sense that this text you probably haven't read in books, right? Or seen it on the internet. It's simple, yet should be powerful for people to take all the different things, and it starts with levels. Just if you're worried about, well, what kind of setup should I use? If you're that early stages, and the couple guys that I talked to that were having trouble missing trades, not pulling the trigger, they have a setup identified. But if you don't, you start with levels where you think the market is going to have and find support resistance. Then create mechanics around that. Wait for a pattern. A few of them I've done webinars or events or videos and recordings about. Have some mechanics into what you'd want to do. Don't worry about what I risk or what the guy next to you risks or anything else. But you have to go back to what he says, a risk plan is your best friend. Now, here's where that gets tricky. Someone asks, we need to spend time developing an effective risk management plan. That's a lot of case by case. What's risk to me might not be risk to you, and neither of us would be wrong. Like 3 ticks of heat, I don't like, but that might be fine for you. And you wouldn't be wrong, and I wouldn't be wrong. Part of an effective risk management plan is just having one. That's well said, Dave. Someone else says since he's joined the Edge, he's changing his perspective on the market from perfection to probabilities. You can't be consistent. You can't review an inconsistent execution. Meaning, yeah, I take this trade sometimes, but not every time. And that's why he says, assess everything at the end of each week before making changes. A way to do that, Tom, because it's well said as far as assessing and creating a good risk management plan. And what I'll do is when he gets back settled in, I'll see if he can come and host a meeting to cover that point, to answer that question. What is a good risk management plan? Now, again, my answer to that is it's unique to the individual. Obviously, there's going to be some parameters where there's too much risk, and no matter what kind of person you are. But you don't want to cookie cutter people into the exact same setup. You just want to identify the setup. Some people could be more discretionary than others. Some shouldn't be really discretionary at all. You'll start to review and say, when I wait for a correlation to help get my ass in the trade, I'm really good. I just wish I could show you what this guy has to help you categorize and really review efficiently. It'll be the most efficient way to review in the history of reviewing. Yeah, it's a good point, Tom. So now that's well said. The process, that word is better. Instead of giving you an effective plan, the process of creating one. And I'm not going to cover this in this answer to that question, but it has a lot to do with, what you want out of a trade. You start at your targets because you could eliminate certain risk parameters based on, hey, I want 10 points out of the trade. Well, okay, I'm not going to argue with you, but you can't risk 3 ticks to make 10 points. You're going to start at the extremes. The bigger the winners you want, meaning the bigger the moves you think are going to happen and you want to catch, bigger area that you got to play ball in. I made a note of this, though, and it could be for a future session, and I like him. I'd give him this topic, and then him and I will go through it. He was one of the first classes brought in. When I started a prop firm, they didn't have a really super structured educational program because most of the guys that came in had floor experience, so we knew how to trade. We didn't have to be taught bids, offers, and things like that. But Brad, when he was brought in right out of college, that first class was like 6 or 8 guys, and they structured where every day they had to go to class, and it was around, I think, noon. Because we were either done trading or things slowed down at around 10:30, 11, like they do now, and they would go to class, and there would be a couple guys that would, senior traders that would go through class, right, when they'd run through. And it wasn't like a textbook structure. The structure that this Edge course has is far beyond what we even had back then. But still powerful sessions. But think about it. Every day they had to go to class. And then you're more accountable that way also, right? And I think Woj, who's a contributor to the Edge, as you guys know, hired Brad or interviewed him, I think. But this is, whether you, I don't know if people, how much you like what he said here, but I'm telling you, as someone been doing this a long time, this is well put. And then this is the key: a risk plan. If you don't have a risk plan, then you don't have a plan. Trading isn't about what you make; it's what you don't lose. And someone might think, well, then that'll force me to miss more trades. I don't want to lose. No, you don't want to lose and get your face ripped off every time you have a position on and are wrong. And it goes back to his top comment here, right here, at the very top. Do your homework, which means create your damn setup. Trust your risk management plan to protect you versus what? Being wrong. Because being wrong is why you're not pulling the trigger. Because being wrong leads to, right here, scared to trade. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that you're scared to trade. Remember when Rocky did it on the beach before he fought Clubber Lang? He said he was scared, turned it around, ended up beating him. I just happened to see that a couple weeks ago. That's why I remembered it. Anybody got any questions? I'm going to stop the recording and just go over things that are, again, coming out this week, not to be redundant. So I'll stop the recording, and this week